Father in heaven, we are truly grateful for this day, another day that we get to spend on your creation. We're thankful for this opportunity that we have at this time to study more about how we can be better servants for you. We pray that you would bless our teacher, bless Brother Neil and his efforts to instruct us and all of his efforts that he has going on in your kingdom. We pray that you would bless him and bless his family as he works for you. Pray that you would bless us as hearers this morning, that we might be able to make application into our lives, that we might be better servants. And we pray that you would forgive us when we're willing to repent and watch over us and care for us. And all these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We are dealing in the unit, the preacher and people. And I couldn't think of a better way to introduce this unit than to share with you something that I got originally from Wendell Winkler. It has proven to be one of the most helpful. It was preemptively encouraging, so that when I encountered what he told us about, that I was not shocked or caught off guard whatsoever. And the title of this little segment is Meet the Congregation. To me, it's one of the greatest sources of encouragement and discouragement to think about how diverse our people are that we get to serve and to work with. I mean, whatever you want to say, there's never a dull moment. I think about, I got an email this morning from what I guess we would consider now a former member, very, she proved to be very hypersensitive. I got to thinking about what I'm about to share with you and thinking, has she been everywhere I've been? And I can very easily think of who she was in Denver. She was a man in Denver. And then who she was in Virginia, another woman of a different race. But it's just interesting how this transcends all of that. And it'll be helpful. And what we're talking about is the idea that there are certain dynamics that are going to show up in every congregation. Now, I don't know how the range of how small to how large the congregations are where you're preaching. It just doesn't take very many people for you to see these personalities showing up. Okay. So I want to share with you, I don't know, 12, 15 different personality types you're going to run into in the local church. The first one we call brother, come on strong. And you can, brother or sister, Mr., however you want to put it. But I call it brother, come on strong. And he's the guy, or she's the woman, who comes straight to the preacher and tries to become his best friend. And just mark it down. These are not usually your lasting friends. Have you ever encountered that? Somebody who just right out of the gate just latches onto you, and they just are, they want to give you every tip. They want to help you out in every conceivable way. And they want to spend a lot of time with you and those sorts of things. In my experience, this is my fourth congregation to work with in 32 years. There's always a Mr. Come on strong. They always want you to come over they always want to come over to your house, or you to come over to theirs. They want to do things with you and wrap you into their cocoon. And what can happen a lot of times is they can have an agenda that they want to skew your perception of what the local congregation is. So I'm thinking about when you first come to a work, that this is a guy or it's typically a guy for a preacher that really wants to have your ear. And the thing is that these are not usually your lasting friends. You either are going to get crossways with them, or you're going to get wise to their modus operandi. Does that make sense? Have you ever run into brother, come on strong? Okay. Yeah. All right. Pretty well. I'm telling you, who I'm sharing with you today, I have found everywhere I've been. All right. Number 2, Mr. What this church needs. Okay, so assuming you run into this brother, what does he think the church needs?
Him.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna say him.
Okay, yeah, needs. And
as far as like his thoughts on it, his setups for it, everything, what he thinks this church needs, that's what it needs.
Okay, all right, yeah, and what can those things be? I guess is the question. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
I've heard it a lot. Change of leadership, change in the style of worship, change in the style of the preaching, so things like that.
So, and then, do you ever get to the why? What's the premise behind such a sagacious move from him?
Sometimes it's because I think or I feel.
Yeah. So it's a perception of what the church is lacking and what would improve the church, and solicited or not, and it's usually not. He's the guy. He knows about that. But I have found typically it's a pet project. What are they passionate about? What really drives them? And so that may be a neither right nor wrong, but they figured out that the church is not evangelistic enough. They may have no idea of what's going on evangelistically, but perhaps they are behind a certain method, and it needs to be that particular method, and only that method. That nothing else works. It could be that they see that there's a lacking element of that in certain other or it has to do with the education program. You just think about the benevolence. Somebody said leadership, that needs a different style of leadership. So oftentimes it's, we need a much more open communication from the eldership, which can be true, or from the leadership. But there's some things that the congregation doesn't need to know. But that the point is, their personality type is they know what the church needs not doing, and they think that you will help them to get it done. All right. Other thoughts? All right. Number 3. Mr. and Mrs. occupy all your time telling you all their troubles. It's a long name. Must be Slavic or something. Let me give it to you again. Mr. and Mrs. occupy all your time telling you all their troubles. We're shaking out the brethren after services, right? Have you ever, out of just the rote of habit and trying to contact as many people as possible, you reach out to shake a hand or hug? I'm not saying this is going to always be a lady, but whoever it is, and saying, "How are you?" And as soon as the words come out of your mouth, there's a tinge of regret, because you're about to hear and it's every time. You're going to hear every woe, every pain, every problem, every difficulty. Be aware. So how do you, and I guess there's a place for this all the way through, and we should probably talk about it. What do you do? What do you do with Mr. Come On Strong? Let's go back to number 1. What do you do? How do you handle a Mr. Come On Strong? And the answer is, go ahead, Mike.
You have to manage your time and manage your expectations, and depending where he is in the faith, trying to get him involved and other people involved with him is a good point. And then also, Mr. Come On Strong, a lot of people like to talk a lot of noise but don't do no work. So I always have a process where I believe, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, you come up with an idea. Okay, just don't give me a complaint. Give me a solution. Because, for us to work in this congregation together, we have to work together in a way that's going to be productive. So I think we can counteract that.
Yeah, and I think now that's especially going to be helpful with our number 2 guy, Mr. Come On Strong. What I would suggest with Mr. Quick to be your friend, or Mr. Come On Strong, is to put up some boundaries.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jay. All right, so that's you've got to get control of that situation, because he's trying to utilize you for his agenda. And you've got to I appreciate what Mike said. 2 Timothy 2:24 and 25 is our watchword. We're going to be kind to all, gentle. That's going to be our way of that, but firm. We're going to make sure that they understand, look, I'm not your mouthpiece. I'm not, I don't represent a minority. I'm everybody's preacher. Right. And so you try to set that tone. My thought is set that tone subtly. If they don't get subtle, then become much more obvious to them. Go ahead, Sam. Your own.
I was gonna say, this is. Are we talking like if we started a new work? These are the people that
they can be.
us?
They can be. Some of these personalities may come to you. Some of these personalities are, as you get to know them better, they may emerge more. But like number one would be kind of unique to when you first start a work, because they're gonna leech on to you pretty quick.
Yes, sir. Because I was thinking, as preachers coming in, we want to give our best impression and everything, but it's difficult to set up boundaries when you're like, well, I want to make sure not to keep the congregation happy, but you're like, I want to keep this job in one sense. So,
and so that's where you've got to be very careful in an altruism and a thinking the best of others. We've also got to use wisdom because a lot of times there can be flattery. They can make you, they're manipulating, and they're manipulating for their purpose. And that's also true with our second guy, what this church needs. Make sure that you set up guards so that you're not susceptible to flattery. That's really, if you're susceptible to flattery, it's a character weakness, if not flaw. And you've got to make sure that you don't allow somebody to suck you in by greasing your wheels or buttering you up. Go ahead, Mike.
Also, that includes all what we're going to talk about. Is going to include the wife too, because
for sure.
there are members that will target you and the wife to manipulate, to monopolize time with that, and
Right.
the boundaries you set as the preacher. Also, the wife has to be in agreement to set those boundaries too. Now, I don't know if you do this like this. When we meet and greet the congregation at the end, me and the wife are together. So
Yep.
I have two sets of eyes looking on the situation, and she's reading it. She's like, you got to be kind of careful with this one here, because she may see the man talking. She's looking at the wife, and the wife is like, "Oh, please, not again." So she's getting drugged through, but that's a whole different dynamic,
Right.
So that's a way to set boundaries too. Is that when they see the preacher and they see his wife, because sometimes they act like children. They want to separate and divide so they can conquer. So I think that's an important part to this dynamic.
That's a great point, and your wife can serve like a silent partner does in a Bible study, and can have a greater focus on. And especially in our case, and it's going to differ with us if you're married, that one of you is an extrovert, one of you is an introvert, and so that's going to create that dynamic. But that's a great point. That's good. How do you handle the Mr. What this church needs? Go ahead, Jake.
Oh, sorry. My Wi-Fi is so far behind. I start glitching. I'm sorry. My point
Go
was.
ahead and comment on what you were going to.
Okay. You stole the words out of my mouth with setting boundaries. I completely agree. If somebody's coming on strong, you got to say, hey, let's slow down. Also recognizing, as Mike said, it's one side of the story. So they may be pushing an agenda. They may come from a certain perspective or want you to think a certain way about a person or a group or another church locally. But then also be careful with your commitments. And I mean that in a couple ways. Number one, as Mike mentioned, don't just kind of let your schedule be willy-nilly and allow, I will go here. I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this. Don't let them take advantage of your time. But also don't overly commit during times of worship. I think we as preachers can all kind of relate to this. And then after the worship, if they monopolize your time, you can't really talk to anybody who is a newcomer or people who are just walking out the door. If they're like, hey, let me pull you aside here. Well, you just got to set boundaries. I think just want to add.
Well, you're right. And we're going to get to that personality at number 9, but that's an important way to combat that. But what this church needs will benefit from is to realize that the work of the church is multifaceted, and compliment them on their passion and their interest in that particular effort, and validate how important it is if it is a valid work of the church, but remind them of how all of these things work together. Obviously, everything we do as a church is geared toward the saving of souls and helping people to get to heaven. But to try to say that everything else is totally subordinate to any legitimate area. There's some people whose passion is feeding the hungry and the homeless. It's a great tool. It's not the end all be all of the church. And whatever, education, whatever it is, people have their greater interests, and we want to leverage that. That's your core workers. But again, we've said it multiple times, don't let that become the pawn to their agenda. Yes, sir.
I want to apologize. I thought we were still on the first one. My string cut out a bit.
No, what you said was actually the answer to how you handle number 2. And a lot of the strategies are really similar. Yeah. So, but Mr. Come On Strong has got to have boundaries. So does the Mr. What This Church Needs, but you tailor that in different ways. Yeah. I don't remember.
Honestly, so does number 3 needs to have boundaries.
Yeah. And how you handle that will differ from each one. I'll tell you my take on how you handle number 3 by way of boundaries in just a second. Go ahead. Samuel, did you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. I was just going to say for the Mr. What This Church Needs, I think also time is a good way of handling that situation, because while they might say, this is what it needs, as a preacher, we're in a peculiar spot to where we can look at the congregation and start seeing what this church actually needs. And so I think instead of just jumping right onto them, I think commending them and being like, yeah, that's a good work to have, but also seeing what this congregation might need in another sense by giving time.
That's right. And here's the thing. Listen to them, be polite, thank them. You don't have to engage in every fight that you're invited to. And it may just be a time waster for you. So just if it becomes a persistent issue, that's where you can remind them, I appreciate how much time you spend to this. And I can't necessarily do everything that I'm asked to do all the time, because I'm involved in this, and not in a rub it in your nose kind of way, but don't know that I've seen you at this particular activity. And so we all have to make choices, but all of these things work together to help the church to grow. So that's, it's managing that personality. That's what all of this is about, because we're in the people business and they're coming from all different directions. Yes, sir. Jake?
Sorry. I just wanted to share so many different examples. I can kind of put them in a good category or bad category. A good category is, hey, Jake, I'm really struggling with this. Could you preach on it sometime? Yeah. I would consider that good.
Absolutely.
But it seems like there's a majority that's, say in recent weeks here, hey, there needs to be more time between the Lord's Supper things, or so many examples to count. And the one suggestion I've kind of learned, and I'm happy that I have this resource, is whenever it's a change to the worship, I usually just say, this is a great conversation for us to have with the elders, and just push it right over there, move the goalpost.
Absolutely. Well, and that's role clarification. That's where it needs to go. You're not the pastor. Now, you guys that don't have elders, I realize it's a different discussion, but you also operate from an organizational model, and you can still appeal to, though it's not perfect, the men's meeting model, and not take all that on yourself. Yes, sir.
That's one that I've used. You know what? That's a great idea. Let's bring that up at the men's meeting.
There you go. It takes the locus off of that one person and it puts it into what the leadership style that exists there. Yeah, that's good. So how do you handle Mr. and Mrs. occupy all your time telling you all their troubles?
If you're
With a
close
lot
enough
of
to them,
patience.
Go ahead.
With a lot of patience. And you have to observe when you have to look at their age, the situation and circumstances. Maybe they're elderly. Maybe they have a problem with loneliness. They feel that no one's there to talk to them. You can be in a nursing home mode and be in the congregation and feel that way. That you know, so you have to be able to discern. But I think one of the things is that you have to create an environment that everybody cares. The congregation will take over. They will take over some of your personality traits. If you're compassionate, you're patient, you're merciful, they understand it. And they also know that member that has that problem. And so you just don't neglect them, but you have to listen to them and then, okay, well, we'll sit down or we'll set up an appropriate time. And this may not be the appropriate time. So I think
what I'm hearing is empathy. We always want to be empathetic and never lacking in compassion. You know, it may be at our stage of life, it may be hard for us to understand what it's like for your life to almost totally revolve around your medical and health issues. And some people have a greater amount of those than others do. And we want to try to put ourselves in others' shoes, however easy or difficult that it is. I also hear in what you're saying that there needs to be a management of that by way of time, because the personality I'm talking about would love to Jake's point, or Samuel, whoever said that, to take up all your time every service. And when somebody's downloading all their medical woes, there goes that visitor for the first time that you've not had a chance to go and talk to, or that family that hadn't been to church in 2 months. And because you're once again with Sister Jones talking about everything that she's had going on with her, you miss that opportunity. So an appropriate time, I think is the way you put it, is a good answer. I would also say, though, that we have a responsibility to that brother or sister to try to help them to reframe their perspective, and not, because it's easy for us to give into the problems that we're having and to obsess and absorb ourselves with those things. And it doesn't create the strength of character that we need, even if we're in a chronic situation or a circumstance that's going to ultimately wind up in death. We live with hope. Paul says in Romans 12:12, rejoice in hope. I can look at 1 Peter 1:3-9, when he's talking about people who are suffering persecution, how often he says joy and rejoice. No matter what we're going through, we need to encourage people to live with the optimism that only a Christian can have, and not obsess, because all that's going to do is make them more negative, and it's not going to make their problems any better. So that's going to be done gently and subtly, and not with a ball peen hammer. We're going to do that with a feather. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to that. We have to lead in our verbiage. When we're asked how we are, blessed. I am just so blessed, and if we lead in that way, we're gonna shape the framework of how people are going to respond when we ask them how they're doing. So it's important to not give into that. Oh, I know that must be, and it's that's part of the empathy that we have to have. But I know that must be terrible, and that that's the answer they're looking for. That's what they want.
Yeah,
you're feeding that, and you're fueling that fire. But just a simple reminder but aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky?
Yeah.
Aren't we blessed to be in the body of Christ, where at the end of it all, none of this is going to matter?
And that's a great point. I do think occasionally you need to take one for the team. and allow them to have that moment occasionally, but reframing, trying to influence a perspective change ought to be the prevailing approach to somebody like that. And I think it comes down to being careful how you address them. It's as simple as that. It's great to see you today, Sister Jones. Even though our reflex action is, how are you, Sister Jones? Oh man, here we go. Or you look great today. Or some way to avoid the trigger question that's going to lead them down that place that they're just so prone and apt to go. All right.
The ornery side.
And then Jake, go ahead.
Real quick, I was going to say about communication is body language. You can say the right thing, but your body language speaks something different. And so if you're not sincere in what you're saying, make sure your body language communicates the same message that you're trying to say. Because you don't want to do that. Just like we talk about preaching, our actions in the pulpit matter, how we illustrate things, not just with words. We have to demonstrate it. We're human, and so we need to go back to that side to make sure that person understands where we are.
Yeah. No sarcasm. No, we should be sincere in our love for one another, for sure. Michael, what were you saying? And then we'll get Jake.
The ornery side of me was like, well, if you want to know an easy way to just get out of that conversation real quick, go, you know what? Sister so-and-so was talking about that just this morning. And then you just kind of step away.
Yeah. Or you can, if somebody's chronic and they're complaining, ask them about Sister Smith, who's been in the hospital for 2 weeks, and say, have
you heard anything?
Have you reached out to her? I know that she would appreciate hearing from you. What does that do? You haven't done it, but you've reminded her she's not the only one who's hurting and suffering. Mm-hmm. And, it's just self is the biggest problem we have consistently anyway. And we've got to make sure that we help ourselves and others to turn our focus outward and upward. Go ahead, Jake.
What I was going to share a few minutes ago, y'all seem to cover in the discussion. I will add. No, that's great. I will add, if there is a Mr. and Mrs. occupying my time, you have to be blunt with them at times and say, in honesty, I need to get somewhere. Or in honesty, I need to talk with this person or handle this. But I also want to add that if they're occupying your time and there's great fruit in it, then by all means, yes. And then a third category, if they're occupying their time and really it's just a vent session, and it's not a vent session with one of your close buddies where you care, deeply and personally, but just some person just battering you down, you got to put a stop to it. And that's where you get into what Michael S. said. There's this woman over here who's dealing with the same thing. I'd love for you to talk to her.
Yep.
And I'll let you carry the conversation on.
That strategy is going to work with a couple of our folks. And you're actually bringing up somebody that I think is one of our most common characters. And again, he's number 9. And this is the one who we're talking about right now is the one who takes up our time telling us about her troubles. The chronically, woe is me. There is an entire personality, and we'll talk about who they are, that we will call Mr. or Mrs. Take Up All Your Time. That one may not be maybe the most positive person in the congregation, but there's still a personality that you've got to be able to manage. But let me get to we'll get to him in a moment. Number 4, people seem to have a hard time with, preachers may have a hard time with, is we call him just simply Mr. Gigger. You know what I mean by gigging? Picking, criticizing.
They nitpick. Yeah, they constantly nitpick everything. They nitpick. Well, you could have said it this way, and it could have came out. Or you may even have elders or leaders that come to make announcements and will gig you through the mediary of saying, because they didn't really like what the sermon said, they didn't like that preach that. We don't want to talk about that subject. Well, we preach the whole counsel of God. We don't preach just what we want to preach. We have to preach the whole thing. So you got many different little aspects of gigging.
Yeah. And it can happen publicly. It can happen one-on-one. But and it can happen with sophistication. A left-handed compliment, we might call it. Somebody who is under the guise or premise of paying you a compliment is actually, there's a barb in it. There's a criticism, and that's a personality type. I'm trying to help you to not see it, to take it personally. It's hard in the local work not to take it personally, but this person exists everywhere. And there's probably psychological reasons for why. Whether it's for compensation, it's the way it may have to do with their home environment that they came out of. It may have to do with a current relationship in which they struggle. It could be, and I'm not so big into trying to figure out, is this a superiority complex and inferior? It doesn't matter. You have to deal with it either way. And it's not just somebody older than you or somebody in leadership. I remember on an occasion years ago where I was shaking hands going through the auditorium, and one of the teen girls got my attention and came over. And she said, hey, I want you to know that I have a notebook in which I write down all the mistakes that the preachers make, grammar, those kinds of things, misusing a reference. And I go, oh, really? And I'm thinking, I'm your local preacher, so I'm sure that book is mostly, and it's a big notebook. And I saw lots of pages filled in. And in a situation like that, somebody who doesn't have a lot of life's experience yet, I didn't scold her. I don't think that would have been the right way to handle that. I didn't really dignify it. I just said, well, how about that? And I walked and I acted like, that's going to hurt a little bit, but I didn't act like it bothered me at all, and just moved on and tried to work on that relationship. So, because sometimes you may have unwittingly done something to them and they're getting even passively, aggressively, and yet doing that. And you've got, I guess my point is, you have to have a thick skin and a tender heart, and realize sometimes folks tease, and that's the way they're trying to connect with you. But realize that personality is everywhere, and it's coming from a place of their own insecurity, shortcomings. Typically, somebody who has good self-confidence is not typically going to be gigging somebody else. There's some ulterior reason. Go ahead, Sammy.
I was going to say a couple things. Is it bad? My first thought was, all right, I'm going to start making my grammar worse.
Well, yeah.
Let's fill in that book,
I will say this. I'm not going to change. I'm always wanting to improve. And if there's in a criticism, if there's something I can do to be better, I want to be better. But I'm not going to kowtow or acquiesce to a critical spirit, because a critical spirit, typically, it's a spiritual problem, and it can't be overcome by some change you make. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a change that they need to make.
The second thing was, for that thick skin, Ezekiel 3:8. God says, I'm going to make your forehead as hard as their forehead. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying just to be like, being, of course, God's talking about being strong and being able to stand up to these people. But I think, as you mentioned, preachers need thick skin to kind of, or like a duck, just let that water roll off and you just keep on doing what you can do.
Great. That's exactly right. Yep.
I would have said what you said was, isn't that something, and walked away. I would have said, well, you were busy today, weren't you? And then just walked away.
Or we put a whole new page in there today, didn't we? With a smile and jovial, because really, then what do they have left?
They got nothing.
They just played their card. You played yours.
You've taken all their ammo away.
That's it. Yeah, that's right. And that's really the point of this is, it's not you, and it's not unique to that kind. It's not a reason for you to go, boy, I need to go look for another congregation. I need to go somewhere else, because they're going to look different, but they're going to be at the next place that you go. You can count on it. They're going to be there. Number 5, guarantee y'all have one of these. Mr. or Mrs., have you been to see? Have you been to see? They think it's their job to make sure that you're going to the hospital and the nursing home. Now, make sure you're making those visits. Is it a viable criticism? Is it a shortcoming in your ministry life? So here's how I would suggest you handle that. Apologize and do your best to follow up with the one that you missed. And say, boy, I feel like we probably need to work on our means of communicating, because a lot of times what will happen, and this is not to overly defend yourself, but if this is the case that I really didn't get the word on that, and boy, I feel bad because they were in the hospital for 3.5 hours and the word never got to me, and they were in and they were out. But this is the one where I would say, the next time you see them, hey, have you been to see Bob? You've been in the hospital for 6 days. 99.9% of the time, I'm not going to say there's not an exception. Guess what? They haven't. They want you to go and do all these things, but they're not going. They're not practicing Matthew 25, 31 through 46. And fair is fair, and not with sarcasm, not with the satisfaction that you're about to get them, but just the mention of that should inject some humility into the situation, to where they see, maybe instead of me monitoring how the preacher and others are doing things, that I need to accept that this is a mutual responsibility that we all have. Okay. Thoughts on that? Yes. Mike T.
And you're not having elders sets a little different precedent, but being able to delegate, to share roles, to encourage. No, I may not have been able to go visit that certain person, but brother so-and-so did, and I'm following up on it. And that's a part of communication. Developing the men in the congregation to be benevolent in spirit towards one another is a part of the gospel. So I try to make sure that, we call it welfare checks, because we have saints, and that's what I would ask them. Have you done a welfare check? Have you, when's the last time you went in? My situation may be a little bit different, because when I came into the congregation, I wasn't the minister, but I came in doing nursing home work. I came in visiting people I didn't know, to make sure that they knew that God still cared about them. So it's a natural thing for me, but I didn't do it to pat myself on the back. Then I would go back to brothers. Hey, brother so-and-so, do y'all know what's going on? That sister or that brother that's in the nursing home, nobody's been by to see them. Why is that? Don't put it just on the preacher. That's a part of all our work. Each one of us have a part to do. So I try to help that with that concept.
Well, and there are certain dynamics that we have to work within, and it's just that way. We've got to be cognizant of it, and one is that there's going to be, you've probably run into this, where somebody, if they're a weak or ungrounded Christian, new Christian, whatever it is, they are just going to assume or think or even call you the pastor. You've got to work through changing that dynamic. And there's also the dynamic in a lot of congregations that says 50 people can come see me, but if the preacher doesn't come, you know what they say? Nobody came to see me. What they mean to say is the preacher didn't come to see me. Should it be that our visit means this and everybody else's visit means this? No. But is that look, we can live in the ideal world or the real world. The world we want to live in is one where people recognize it's everybody's responsibility, and we're working to change that culture the whole time we're there. Meanwhile, we got to live in the real world, and of course we want because when we make visits, you know what that does? That makes our preaching more effective. It makes folks more prone to listen to us. It tells them that we care, and so when we preach the difficult, They know that we've walked through the valleys with them, that we've been in the trenches with them, and it makes them more amenable to the influence we're trying to have in their lives. But this personality just kind of is that hypercritical. You didn't do it. I got you. And then that's how do you manage that personality? Because that's different. That's a circumstance going beyond what's even reasonable. Yes.
I think it was class 2 or 3. You talked about setting a plan where the preacher and his wife would meet everyone in the congregation to build that rapport we talked about. And this would come into that rapport because you have built that time in, and you get to know them and they don't get to know you. Because some people don't even want you to come to their house. They only want you to meet them at the building. So if you don't build that rapport, we come in an age and time now where people, they're very private. They don't want that. They don't. Right. Sometimes they say they don't want the one-on-one, but when they need the attention, you don't give it to them. Oh, like you don't care nothing about me. That's not true. So I understand that, but I go back to that conversation when you reflected that as we go through our ministry, make sure that we have communications with each family and set up a time that you go through the congregation like that. That helps this rapport right here.
Yeah, and just remember, people have convenient memories. People will do it. People say things out of their hurt that can frustrate you. Let's say you have somebody over to your house and they spend, they're there and they're there a couple of hours, and when they leave, they say, so maybe something like this happened to my wife recently. She had a woman and her children over. And that was there. By the way, we have ladies' Bible class once a month in our home. And so all the ladies are invited. And when she's leaving, she's saying, I told my husband I was coming here. And he said, well, what'd you do to get that invitation? Well, we're always inviting people over. That says a lot more about that couple. And why would you do that? You've just spent 2 hours of individual attention. It's not the first time. It's not the only time. But it's not every week. But you can't do every week. There's in our situation in a congregation of 350, and even when you've invested in some people's, my point, they still have got to get the dig in that says you're not serving me, ministering to me. And again, all that comes back down to is if I'm only focused on me, then all I can see is my hurts, my pains, my deprivations, and what I'm not getting. And we've got to work through it. Of course, you don't say anything. I mean, you just there's sometimes when you just laugh, smile, and just move on. And I think that's what you got to do in those situations. But that's getting to know people and knowing that people have sometimes unrealistic expectations is right. Somebody else have a hand up? Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes, and I've noticed that this has happened, and I'll say it's happened here, where somebody will say, have you been by to see so-and-so? And I didn't know a thing about it.
For sure.
That they had let somebody know that they've known for 30 years, but they didn't bother letting me know.
Breakdown in communication. That's right.
Yeah, that's what Mike was talking about, and sometimes it can get frustrating, and sometimes you just have to really specifically say, I can't go visit those I don't know about.
That's right. I think sometimes there's a sense that we're omniscient because we're the local preacher. And
how is it you don't know you're the preacher?
Yes.
These people have only known me for 9 months. They've known you for 40 years. They let you know, but you didn't let me.
Yeah. Yep. It's for sure. All right. Anything else on our first 6? All right. Or 5. 5.
The scripture says, be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove.
That's it. Yep. That's it. We've got to make sure we're striking the balance. And it's not about winning arguments. It's about recognizing the dynamics of a congregation and how to manage that. Number 6, Mr. Never Commend You. And the Mr. Never Commend You is just the person, if you hear from them, there's something that I mean, they're not going to compliment you. Don't look for them to be the one that feeds your need for vitamin E, because they're just not going to do vitamin E of encouragement. They're not going to be that. Number 7, Mr. Watch how you spend your time. That's the person that may notice when your car's parked at the building and that sort of thing. And again, on all of these, Mr. Never commends you. I'm not sure what to tell you about that. Just to say that there are people like that, and just know that's probably not going to be your best friend, right? But it's not somebody that should become an enemy. Some people are just going to be closer to than you are to others. And it's a good reminder that we don't do this for the praise and accolades of men. All of us are appreciative when that does happen. Mr. Watch how you spend your time. I've heard how like the late Franklin Camp would handle that. I called the building at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you weren't there. This is back in the days of course, landlines. And what Brother Camp would do is he'd get to the office at 4 a.m. And this went on and this went on and this went on. And so one morning at 4 a.m., Brother Camp called this brother. And just because the brother had said was, hey, I came by the building, didn't see you there. I was going to see if we want to go do X, Y, or Z. And so Brother Camp called him at 4 a.m. and said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm up. And, I wanted to engage you in some kind of spiritual thing. Well, I don't know. I've never gone to that extent. We've talked about writing down what you do on a daily basis. And if Mr. Watch how you spend your time may lodge a criticism with a men's meeting or with an eldership, and they approach you, don't be defensive, don't be angry. Just pull that out and say, well, I hate to hear that he feels that way. Here's if you want to know, I've got what I've done for the last week. I wouldn't just automatically give it to them. If they want to see it, they'll want to see it one time. You show them how you've been spending your time. And if you're doing your job of being a good steward of your time, that'll be the end of it. And the next time Mr. Watch how you spend your time comes along, then the bomb has already been diffused. Does that make sense? All right. Number 8, sorry. And this is the one Jake's already brought up for us. Mr. Take Up All Your Time. Who is Mr. Take Up All Your Time? What's he look like? Or she? It's usually he. Describe him for me. I'd say he's
I was thinking, when I think of taking up all my time, it's hijacking classes to where you're trying to get through like a Bible class and that kind of stuff. And they, I've talked to other preacher friends before. 5 minutes is an eternity in Bible class.
For sure.
And so that sense, they sit close and they got their hand up or ready to just speak.
No, they don't have their hand up. The ones. All right, I gotta.
You touched a nerve. That one.
I gotta catch myself here. The ones that I've heard about in the past,
in the distant place somewhere.
Don't put their hand up. They just start talking and they keep talking, and their digressions have digressions.
And they're frustrating in their own way. Both of those people, the one that raises their hands because you have this kind of an anaphylactic reaction because you know it's coming, but the one that doesn't, they're also rude in addition to being a taking up. Now that's that's a category all its own. PTP, one year I was asked to do a class entitled "Help, My Bible Class Has Been Hijacked." And I dealt with 5 or 6 different personality types, and we could talk about that sometime, how you manage.
Yes, please.
Well, and really it's a gradated, more and more direct in the classroom. And if that doesn't work, it is a one-on-one conversation where you lovingly but plainly say, we got to change this. Now that's not really who I have in mind for your local work, but he exists. What I'm talking about is usually the way I describe it. It's the wonderful and usually involved person who is typically retired, who has time on their hands. If their wife is still alive, they've shoved them out the door because they're underfoot there and they need something to do, and they mean well, but they think that you have as much free time on your hands as they do. Despite the wonderful things I've said about them, they don't give thought to what you may have going on, what you may be in the middle of. If you're working, and invariably this becomes an issue, not when you're out visiting or counseling, or somebody's in your office. Although I've had the Mr. Take Up All Your Time who sees that you're with somebody, and they're going to wait because they got all day. And so you go from an hour you've spent in counseling to where now, and you know that if they sit down, it's at least a half an hour, maybe longer than that, right? Because really time is elapsing differently for them than it is for you, because you probably got a schedule of things that you wanted to accomplish that day. And this is a walk-in. This is not something that you've scheduled, and they're there, and you've got to deal with that. And especially if it becomes a recurring scenario. And Mr. Take Up All Your Time is a recurring character that you're going to have to deal with. Yes, sir. Sam?
I was just going to ask, do you think it's because they're trying to fill up their own time?
For sure. They worked at the water department for 50 years, but now that job's done. And now they're in the, what do they do? And I'm saying they may be people who do visit. They do work around the church building. They love the Lord, and they are active and a part of things. And you want to encourage them. They're probably an ally. There's somebody that is loves you, and they want to encourage your work. They just don't realize that you're not retired, and that preachers do work more than 2 hours a week. And so, or 4 hour, whatever it is. And they like you. And so they want to spend time with you, but you've still got to manage that, because you could make them your ministry, and you're going to get a whole lot left undone if you do that. Michael?
Yeah. One of the ways that you can handle that one or manage that one is actually just go out of your way and schedule a time where you two can get together and talk. And if you put it on the schedule, they might get the hint from that. They might not, but just try to find a way to schedule a time. So you know what we need to do? We need to get together and have lunch. Let's do that on Tuesday. How's Tuesday work for you?
It's a great strategy. And you think about why that's a great strategy is that you're telling them, I like to spend time with you. I want to spend time with you. Yeah. But it's something that can have a beginning and an end. And it's going to be at a neutral site. It's not at your study, at your office. I think you might have to develop this ability to have some things that are always on the burner that need to happen in your work. Maybe you had it scheduled to do later. Maybe you were in a groove, because I'm telling you, Murphy's Law, it's going to be that time when you are just hitting stride, and you're just you're in a sermon or Bible class riding groove, and they come in the door. But you still need to go visit Sister Sally down at the hospital. So you can start managing that situation when Brother Take Up All Your Time comes in the door. We'll say more about that in a minute. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, Mr. Take Up All Your Time, put him to work. Listen, I know sometimes the easiest way is to try to push them aside. But if you put them to work and say, listen, I'm going to go visit so-and-so. I'm going to go do this. I got this Bible study. You can come along. Do you have any Bible studies? See, I'm looking for the opportunity to mentor somebody that cares. And if they care about, if they love me, they love what I do, then they're going to want to be a part of it. So you may find a diamond in the rough, and it's just the way you may spin it to see, because those connections that they used to have and used to be in the workforce, they're the one that may enrich you in the history of the area. And as a preacher, we need to know that information.
That's right.
And so don't look at it as an impediment. Yeah, look at it as an opportunity to learn more, because you'll start finding out more about the area, why it changed, the economics, the different
or
things.
the church. Yeah,
And
there's so much.
And the church.
They're a valuable commodity. They're not an adversary. And I'm not saying that any of these folks are, but you know, being able to combat the drain of time may be now it may not be that you always have the ability to go and do that. And I still think boundaries is a common theme in all of this. I knew a fellow that was a younger guy. He liked to move from place to place, member of the church, and his parents were wealthy, and so he could kind of just see the world, you know, and that's what he was doing. Had an Alaskan Husky that he always had with him, and it was, you know, he was just had the time, and he'd come in, and he was just a guy who could just shoot the breeze and talk for an hour. He didn't necessarily want to be involved in some other things, and we had a conversation about that. Meanwhile, had to manage that. It may be that you meet him on the way out. One way Garland Elkins, I don't know if you know that name or not, one way that Garland Elkins had of trying to bring something like this to a close is you listen, you take one for the team, and it seems like it's going to go on, because sometimes this can go for hours. He would interject at some point and say, you know, we've talked about some things that were very important today, and I just think it would be appropriate for us. Let's just have a word of prayer, you know, and that was his way. A closing prayer is helpful in a lot of situations, right? We're kind of cued for that. And Brother Elkins would end a lot of visits with a prayer that kind of gets you. And again, these are just ways to leverage control of your time, because your time's precious. Ephesians 5:16. We want to use it wisely. And investing in a brother like that is important, but also having means whereby we can take control of the situation is important. Number 10. 9, sorry. My numbering is off. Obviously, I missed a number somewhere. Number 9, Mr. We need a sermon on ... whatever. Again, I mean, this is just to know that this guy is everywhere. I don't even know that this rises to the level of a strategy needed. I thank them. If I need to, I'll have the conversation about, one of you already mentioned that, Acts 20 verse 27. I have not shunned to declare to you the whole counsel of God over a period of time. We're going to try to deal with everything that's in God's word. But appreciate your help on that. Number 10, Mr. Questions to no benefit. This is your Bible class person who never gets to an answer, but loves to ask the questions.
What did you say again?
Mr. Questions to no benefit. What's the use? Why are you raising these questions? You know, maybe it's philosophical, it's esoteric, it has nothing to do with anything practical, or it's that person who loves to raise questions, but you can't pin them down, and that's dangerous, because there may be an agenda under that's trying to undermine the absolute nature of truth. Everywhere I've ever been, that person has been there. Number 11, Mr. Brother Jones, our former preacher, ... Y'all run into him or her? What the former preacher did? First of all, don't be sensitive. Express your appreciation for Brother Jones, even if you know that he didn't leave under the best of circumstances and there were problems. People love to idealize that. We have that tendency, don't we? We idealize the past. It was the glory days were not near as glorious as we think that they were. But we have that. Especially people. There's some people who cannot be content in the present, and they just think the past was the golden age. That could be it, or maybe this person had an especially closer relationship with the former preacher than they do with you. Thank them. Get the kernel of truth out of that you can learn. Gain from it. But try to create a scenario or an environment where we can appreciate that some people have strengths in some areas and some in others. I'm not the counselor that the former preacher was, or I'm not going. It's just not an interest of mine to be involved in the Lions Club. I'll be involved in other civic organizations. Don't have a problem with the Lions Club per se. It's just that, I don't have to be the former preacher. I've got different ways to approach how to be effective in the local work, but do that without sensitivity, because be thankful that they loved the preacher. And they can become somebody who has a greater respect. And in fact, they may do that to you the whole time. And whenever you leave one day, when the next guy comes in, they'll say, Brother Walker, our former preacher, did that. It's just a personality type. All right. Somebody have a comment? I didn't know. Go ahead, Mike.
Question.
Okay.
It's number 11, right?
That's number 11.
All right. I think about number 11 along with the one that always has a comment negative. The preacher is not part of the congregation. They treat you as, you just work for the congregation, and whatever happens in the congregation, you're not really affected. You kind of hear that sarcasm sometimes. Well, I'm thankful that Brother Taylor and so are coming to work with us. And yeah, work with us means you don't do any work, but I got to do the work. And you kind of hear the sarcasm. And how do you deal with that concept of, you're not really my brother, you're just my employee?
So I'd say you begin with humility. Jesus washed his feet to kind of take that mindset. But what you're gonna have to do there is play the long game. That's a culture shift. And being as much a part of congregational life as possible. I would take that as a challenge to approach and try to break that barrier down, because sometimes that's distance, and as distance is eliminated, then that mindset changes. And the more that over the long haul that you interact with one another and you work together, you try to make that person an ally, it'll change the way that they see things. You're talking about sometimes mindsets that go back 50, 60, 70 years. I often heard that it took them 25 years to get there. You're not going to change them overnight. You've got to be patient. But I do think that you can affect change. That, to me, that's one of the ways you can be encouraged as you see the dial move over time. You'll notice change. You can't notice change in a moment, but you can look back over 5 years and see how attitudes have changed. Now, you may not ever fully convince that brother, but I still think you can influence him. Okay, good thoughts. Number 12, Mr. Chip on his shoulder. Be careful about tangling with him. You may end up going down to his level and giving him exactly what he was going after, trying to provoke you. Just itching for a fight, itching for a debate on the most minute, unimportant things. So often we're afraid of being shown up in front of others. I always kind of lean on, I think it's at Luke 7:36, where Jesus says, wisdom is justified of her children. There are people on the sidelines watching the both of you. They're watching how he handles himself. He's watching how you handle yourself. You always make sure, we've already quoted, I think, Matthew 10:16 today. Be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Character is going to shine through ultimately. People are going to see how you both are. They already know how he is. And they're watching to see how you handle that. And if you take the high road, that's a battle you're going to always win by maintaining that kind of attitude. Yes, sir.
John 8:6. Jesus knew that those Pharisees were wrong. They brought one person who is caught in adultery when it takes two. He just took time to draw.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to engage in every argument.
That's right. Let them sit in their stew. A lot of times it becomes painfully obvious and odious what's going on. Good. Let's see. Number 13, Mr. We're not getting equal time. That's the frustrated preacher who may have the appearance of the song leader or the person who's leading the observance of the Lord's Supper. I think that's not handled any better than in a one-on-one conversation. Or maybe it's where you can say, hey, maybe you want to lead the Wednesday night devotional, or something like that. But I think a lot of these characters, just spending some time to try to build a relationship with them will change the nature of how they interact with you. A lot of people have a very counterproductive way of trying to build a relationship. They try to either force it or they try to dysfunctionally make it happen. And you can play the role of showing them functionally how this works, how we can relate to one another, how we can even be friends together. But it's not going to be in an unhealthy way like that. Yes, sir.
Sometimes they're just, the way they're interacting with a position. They're not interacting with a person. They're interacting with your position. And if you take the chance, like you said, I mean, I know this is like a stretch, but this is a real big stretch, but even in a serial killer, they say that when the victim's family starts, when somebody's missing, they use their name. They talk about them as a person. They make them human. Sometimes people's quirks and sometimes people's hangups are with a position and not a person. Mm-hmm. And you got to make that personal.
Well, we live in a culture and a time where authority, anyone who is that vested in any way, and we preach the authoritative word, we stand before people. And so there's a sense in which there's an authority associated with what we do. We can be objectified and not personalized. I think that's a valid point. And I think we mentioned this before. One of the greatest compliments I think we can get as preachers is when people say, well, I didn't even know you were a preacher, and you just seem like a normal guy. That's, to me, we don't want to elevate ourselves and to be in some kind of ivory tower kind of view. We want to be right down as Jesus was. We want to be right down there on the level with folks, so that, I mean, certainly it said of him in a perfect way when Isaiah 53 and verse 2 says there was nothing about him that was attractive or that made him stand out in some way. I love the element of surprise. I mean, I love being able to, and especially in the community, for somebody to see me as a regular person, and for members to compliment and say, I can relate to you, and I appreciate that about you. And that's certainly never through compromise or morally or that kind of thing, but just not putting on airs and being genuine. I think that goes a long way, breaking down those barriers. All right. Any other thoughts about Meet the Congregation? My overall motive in that was to make sure that you don't get discouraged, because it's called interpersonal dynamics. You're just going to have certain personalities in a group of almost any size. And it's helpful to know that they're there. They're all, wherever you go, they're going to be there. Whatever you do, even outside of preaching, they're going to exist. How do you handle it? All right. Somebody had a question, comment?
Well, inner dynamics also would help us to be transparent with the congregation. Sometimes getting ahead of them knowing our schedule, what we plan on doing, especially for us being in school. I had to change the Bible study. Them being transparent to what we're trying to do is important. So as much as we are engaging in their lives, they're engaging in our lives. For us not to communicate and know that we care about what's going on. We keep hammering the word of God. We ain't studying, but yet your Bible time is not consistent. No, you have to be transparent in your communication. That way you gain support. They know what you're doing. As you're growing, they're growing too. I think that's just, that's something that's unsaid, but it's something that needs to be implemented in our lives.
Good point. Yep. I like it. Anything else? All right. I think we can do this in the few minutes that we have left. we had a program at Bear Valley where we would have interns, and it was a 2-year intern program. And I developed a greater awareness of this. And this was about the time I was also starting to teach Preacher in His Work. And I had to come to the realization that not everybody who preaches is an extrovert. I don't know how I got as far as I did in that, in what I do before, and I should have known, because my brother-in-law, who is a highly effective gospel preacher and has been for almost 30 years, is an introvert. I mean, he is the introvert's introvert. He has had to work very hard to come out of his shell in order to be effective in ministry. And my first intern, who, if I called his name, you might know him, effective local work preacher, that's the only constant criticism I had, was his inability to try to really engage with people. And I started asking in every class that I taught, how many of you would consider yourself an extrovert? And I would get them to raise their hands. And if you don't mind, I mean, you're going to be one or the other. How many of you would consider yourself to be an introvert? Okay. 2 out of 5, that's 40%. And if we had Larry, he might bring this to the point that this is almost every, I can't think of an exception right now. I've done this now 13, 14 times. It's right at 50%. 50% extrovert, 50% introvert. And that's pretty well, every marriage is 50-50. Not always, but a lot of times it is. In a congregation, if you were to do this, you'd probably find it's about 50-50. And for every introvert, you need an extrovert. And every extrovert needs an introvert. And it's not surprising that so many people would think everybody who preaches is just an effervescent, bubbly, out there extrovert. It's just not so. Now, I think this is information that's helpful for all of you, because if you're an extrovert like myself, who's married to an introvert, it has helped me. And if you mentor, if you're working with, if you're in a multi-staff situation, chances are, even if you're an extrovert, you'll be working with one. I call this little section, it won't take us long, overcoming introverted tendencies. Overcoming introverted tendencies. And here's where I think this is not going to bother you introverts when you are in the pulpit, because they're planned remarks that you have studied, and it doesn't require, typically speaking, interaction. This comes to play more in one-on-one conversations and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how I'm addressing this. Number 1, break the ice. In conversation, avoid yes/no questions. So a lot of times, let me just talk about the guy that was our intern. He said he walked me through his dynamic. He says, if I go up to meet somebody or talk to somebody I don't know very well, he says, here's what happens. He says, I go up to them and I say, how are you doing? And they say fine. And how are you? And I say fine. He said, I don't know where to go next. And he said, and I know I need to ask a question. He said, so often I'm thinking, if I say this, they'll say this, and then I'll need to say this. He says, I'm 3 or 4 steps ahead in the conversation. If you avoid yes/no questions, ask open-ended questions, then it causes people to give you more of a response. And connected to that, under breaking the ice, is the first rule of conversation. Anybody know what it is? What's the first rule of conversation?
Eye contact.
Okay. I mean, I have a definitive answer. Eye contact's important. Yeah, it really affects things. Listen. Listen is the first rule of conversation. You know why? At least half the population, people love to talk, especially about themselves. And so if you can orient yourself to trying to ask about their background, where they're from, about their family, about what they do for their job, about what their interests are, and listen to that, and then try to ask probing, related questions to that, then you'll get them to be able to talk to yourself. Now, guys, if you're extroverts, the first rule of conversation is listen. Don't be so keen on what you want to tell them. In ministry, we need to find out more about other folks, and that can be a shortcoming on our side of being talking when we need to be listening. In fact, I heard that as a kid all the time. You're talking when you need to be listening, and it can it's an introvert's advantage a lot of times. This is something that Sam has already mentioned. Consider your body language. This may be hard for you as an introvert, but smile and appear at ease. Don't look tense and nervous, even if that's how you feel. Eye contact is huge. Again, with a comportment of ease. Learn the value of why. And then acknowledge your fear in the moment. All of those things will help you to break through some of the barriers that you may feel in conversation. Larry King, anybody know who that is? Some of you older guys may. All of you know who it is. Okay. Larry King wrote a book on this. I don't have the name of the book right now. I don't think. I don't. He said this. He said, what the best talkers have in common. This is great. Number one, they're well-rounded. They have broad horizons. What we always want to do. So I don't know if any of you guys are readers. I love to read nonfiction. And I try to vary what I read because it opens up a lot of doorways. Maybe you don't care a lot about sports. And I'm not saying that you need to be consumed with it, but maybe you learn. So I have 3 sons, despite the fact that my dad and my grandpa and myself love sports. We tried to raise our kids to follow their own interest. And none of my boys are what I'd call sports fans. Now, a few of them like to go to the ball games. But what I told them, because they're in ministry, is, look, you don't have to be obsessed with it. But in all these kinds of things, whether it's politics or whatever, be conversant enough because that may be the hook that allows you to build the rapport that you need. If it's a Bible study, if it's somebody who's a member of the congregation that you want to try to get to know better. So I think King is right. Be well-rounded. Grow your knowledge in different areas. Number 2, they're enthusiastic. I don't mean be fake. But we love serving the Lord. We love people. We love souls. And so there's plenty of fuel for enthusiasm. And remember that enthusiasm is contagious. Number 3, and this is maybe more for, he's targeting the extrovert. By the way, Larry King, who doesn't appear to be, spoke of being painfully introverted for much of his early life. He says, number 3, they don't talk about themselves all the time. Number 4, they empathize. Man, empathy is a powerful tool. It should be genuine, but trying to get to understand things through the lens, through the eye of the other person is powerful. And people need that. You are ministering to folks when you empathize. They're curious. And they have a sense of humor. All right. Like I say, it's just a little short something. Or any thoughts or comments or questions on that?
Yeah. I'm going to try to keep this really brief. And I really mean that. This is a topic that I really struggle with. Mm-hmm. When I started ministry, I was introverted as it gets. Now I'm probably one of the most extroverted individuals in the congregation. I'll speak to anybody. Look out for people who aren't being, talked to. Sit with them at fellowship meals, and way better at conversational.
So how did that happen? How did that happen?
That happened because, well, this is where I don't want to open up. I don't know. It's more personal than anything, but I guess to just keep it straightforward, just forcing myself doesn't mean I enjoy it. there are a lot of stories that people share a 5-minute story that I don't care anything about it. I'm just there like, yeah, okay, you know. And I remember my mom, you know, when I was growing up, whenever she was on the phone with grandma, she'd have a whole different voice than she would like in the normal like realm. And I remember my buddy Zach, his wife told me one time, he said, some of you know Zach, some of you don't, said, Zach, you sound like a whole different person on Sunday than you do the rest of the week. And it's a good thing and a bad thing. You know, you don't want to put on a facade, as you mentioned in one of these points here. I'll find it in a moment, but trying to learn how to be more conversational. I think I've done well in a personal sense, but I'm going to halt my conversation. There's so much I want to share there that's more personal, but I really appreciate what you shared.
Well, thank you. So you think about somebody whose job, for example, you have no background in, you have nothing in common with, you maybe you look at your life and their life and you have absolutely zero in common. If you're brothers in Christ, or if they, I mean, because they have a soul that God loved so much, He gave His Son for. I think there's a fine line. It's not faking it. The love is real. The concern, the desire to build rapport is real. That drives you to do just what Jake said. They may be, you know, if you guys ever, so for me, it would be somebody like if somebody's a chemist, and that's what they do. They test motor oil for their living, right? The blends and there's a lot of technical jargon in that, or an IRS agent, you know, and they just geek out on the tax laws. I love them, and I'm going to sit and ask, hey, well, so how does that, you know, tell me more about actuary tables. Tell me more about these compounds here, and you don't care, but they do, and you care about them, and you know what? It's not your intent. You're not trying to work people, or you're not trying to manipulate people. But guess what's going to happen when you sit there and you ask engaged questions, even if, and I've been there and you've been there, you're bored out of your mind, you love them. You know what they're going to think when they leave? Man, your stock in their mind has gone way up, and your effectiveness with them has, because they're going to say, man, nobody's ever taken the time to listen to this. Most people are fall asleep in another conversation. But it's them personally that you're investing in. And people love to talk about themselves. Even introverts do. All right, Michael S. and then Mike T.
Honestly, and this is something that I appreciate you sharing what you just shared, because there is something about you that I think, and this is just my opinion, and it's worth, you know, about as much as a donut, but you are an inquisitive human being. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to have if you struggle with being an introvert. My brother was a painful introvert. He literally passed out in the Ron Willingham training course when we were having to get up in front of people. But he's such an inquisitive person and really wants to know something about everything that it makes him, it's made him a more extroverted person, because he loves to sit down and say, tell me a little bit about what you do. And I think that having that inquisitive nature and that the desire to learn, and a drive to learn and educate, that is helpful, very helpful when you're an introverted person.
Yeah, I agree.
Seeking to be more extroverted.
Yeah. And really, these are all.
You don't have to be bored. You don't have to be bored with that conversation. No. If you're genuinely inquisitive, you're like, that's fascinating. I never thought about that.
And you may find yourself transformed as a result of that, to say, I never knew that's how that worked. I never knew anybody personally who did that. And it doesn't matter how menial or how irrelevant to you might think it is. it helps you to understand that person better. And so it's a function of that. And it is ministry. It's in its own form. Mike?
That's exactly what I was going to say. If I say concrete jungles or concrete pavement, people don't understand I'm talking about up north, right? Mm-hmm. So being down south, I learned different languages, I learned different thoughts. And as you're learning from that person, what we can do is grab applications that make it applicable. So when we're preaching, we can give some girth to it. So, being in Georgia, I never planted crops but if I'm going to go do teach on about the seeds and the parable of the seeds and the sower, I need to understand about photosynthesis. I need to understand about certain things to help them to get a better understanding. So when I go into James and I'm talking about, receive the engrafted word, which is the implanted word, which is people, I can make an application and go further into their understanding that they may take something back. But if I never took the time to know them or to see where they're at, guess what? I'm robbing myself of that. And
in your ministry.
Yeah. My wife will always tell me, I can't take you nowhere because every time you go somewhere, somebody want to talk to you. And they tell you your life story. That's because I listen. And then I give casual input or just so they can keep going. And then, hey, well, I'm a gospel preacher here at Fort Valley Church of Christ. Would you like to come over and see? And there's a way to engage, and you take that away from
it's a means to an end.
Yeah, and with our society now, everything's technology. We do all that on the internet and everything else, Facebook, this, that, but there's no personal interaction no more that really happens. And as gospel preachers, we got to take advantage of, especially in our congregation, if we're going to meet them, if we want to know how to get a point over to them.
Well, and even as whether it's technology or whatever it is, it's driving us into greater introversion. People still crave connection. And they still, it may make our work more challenging sometimes, but people still want to know and to be known, especially want to be known. What we've been talking about is 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 22, being all things to all men. That's an outward focus. That's to me the application we want to make of that. Never crossing doctrinal lines, but we want to, by all means, save as many as we can. Yes, sir. Jake, you got the last comment. We're right up on the 11 o'clock hour. Go ahead.
Sure. I just want to take a moment to kind of go back to something you said where you initially thought that general consensus of preachers were extroverts. And I think there's truth to that in the sense that to be a preacher, you have to have, no matter what side you fall on, extroverted aspects. You can't just not go visit people. You can't just not make phone calls. And so that's been my struggle throughout my ministry, particularly the earliest part. I hate the phrase my ministry, forgive me, but it somehow gets the point across. Is preaching what I really need to do, or is preaching best suited for my character? It's a huge struggle for me. And of course, I've come to the point where I don't really like labels anymore. I don't really want to call myself a dedicated introvert, or because there are certain applications to that. But I still don't know, and that I still don't know whether this is what I want to do forever. And again, getting even more personal, I keep it very short. With what I would want to do in my life, I'd want to be the greatest scholar, not in the sense that you had mentioned as being the greatest person or most looked up to, but I feel like I would be well suited to be able to answer questions, maybe put some books out, things of that nature, and really lean into that avenue. But of course, I don't know. There's a lot I want to share out, but I'll halt it there.
Well, there's the four personality types, and you have all the way back to, I guess it's Herodotus that talks about it was the phlegmatic, the choleric, the melancholy, and the sanguine, and they all have strengths and weaknesses. look at the life of Jesus, and what you see is he had all the strengths of all those temperament types and none of the weaknesses. That's why he was perfect. And what happens with us is the longer we walk with Christ, we work on minimizing those weaknesses and amplifying those strengths. That's why extroverts become better listeners and introverts become better communicators in one-on-one situations or in group situations, is because we're trying to round ourselves out and to grow. And it really comes to that. All right, guys, I don't mean to ever take you over time here, but great class today. Appreciate it. And keep plugging away. And if you have any questions about any of your assignments, let me know. I hope that your preaching goes well. And we've got equipped, so I've got to go work on some things regarding that. You guys take care. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Neal.
All
All right,
Neil.
God bless.
Thank you.